Hey everybody, guess what time it is? It's time for another Lace on Race hot take. I'm going to do my best to keep the phone steady. Let me tell you, I just got out of a 2-hour plus meeting and I thought that I was going to make it a quiet evening and allow myself to eat my plate of carne asada fries. Actually, they're pollo asada. If anybody from physical therapy is listening, it's chicken, not beef. But then I made the mistake of scrolling through and I looked at the New York Times and it informed me that Roe v. Wade is probably going to be overturned. I was 10 years old when Roe v. Wade first came into effect. And so as an adult, even with the carve-outs and the dilution of the original law in 1973, for the most part, women have been able to choose and have autonomy over their bodies. That is less sure now. The decision hasn't been officially handed down, but sources who are close to it say that it is all but a fait accompli. I'm going to pivot hard to race here. And I want you to hear me well. Not just when it comes to Roe v. Wade, but about every social justice, civil rights action that has happened since 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. As much as it pains me to say it, there is absolutely no such thing as settled law. Let me say that to you again. There's no such thing as settled law. 1964, Civil Rights Act. 1965, Voting Rights Act. 1969, Fair Housing. All of that is in play. There's no such thing as complacency. There can't be. There cannot be. Everything that most of you, because most of you listening are younger than I am, have thought of as self-evident. It's never going to get diluted. It's never going to be changed or outright overturned. We can throw that out the window. It is particularly prescient as we talk about going into the 2022 midterm elections. I am using the account of Lace on Race, and as such, I'm speaking to you as the executive director of the Lace on Race Center for Racial Equity. So I need to give the following disclaimer. Lace on Race is nonpartisan. We do not take partisan positions. But autonomy is not a partisan position, nor is the idea that civil rights stay extant in this country a partisan idea, nor is the idea that voting rights for every individual, an extension of the 13th and 14th Amendments, should be truncated in any way. Nor is the idea that people should be able to live where they choose and to be able to have both the resources and the credit to be able to live where they choose. None of that should be partisan. So I feel like I can speak to this with a fair amount of freedom and of pointedness. In 2020, the Black Spring brought a plethora of newly activated and energized white people to the fore. We saw that in the 2020 elections. And then that interest and the urgency dropped off. And we can see where that has taken us. There is no such thing as a one and done when you are talking about equality and equity in this country. For every person who says, well, of course I believe in this, there are going to be at least one, probably several, who disagree vehemently and are more disciplined in their opposition. This is a big deal. In less than 6 months, we're going to be going to the polls, and every single person in the House of Representatives is going to be up for re-election, and that includes the people who swept in during the Black Spring, who have unfortunately experienced erosion in support, both financial support and just support in general. Every single one of the people elected during the Black Spring, and that includes other BIPOC, are incredibly vulnerable. It cannot be assumed that they will win. In fact, quite the opposite. The opposition to those who believe in equity, the opposition to those who believe in equality, the opposition to those who believe in making the Constitution live out its ideals. Every single one of them is vulnerable. Let's pivot back to race and Roe v. Wade for a couple of moments. We all already know this. Middle class and up will find a way to be able to exercise their rights should they choose to, whether it means going to another state, whether it means going out of the country. It is the most vulnerable, the most economically vulnerable, and the most racially and ethnically vulnerable who will bear the brunt of this. We need to work on two tracks. We need to make sure that the political landscape is such that if the worst does happen, that it can be mitigated as soon as possible and as much as possible. We need to put pressure on individual states, because what Roe v. Wade is doing is not going to take away abortion. It's going to throw it back to the states. Blue states, we don't have a whole lot to worry about. Red states are another thing entirely. And this is why I have never succumbed to the idea of letting red states just fester and ignore them. Even the reddest of red states are at least 30 to 35% progressive. Even the most blue of blue states are at least 30 to 35% crimson. That needs to be remembered. We are going to have to be strategic and every bit as relentless, not just for Roe v. Wade, but for every single progression and advance and victory that we have won individually and collectively for the last 65 plus years. Not one of those improvements are solid. We need to remember that, and we need to have both the humility and the boldness to counteract those forces. At Lace on Race, we believe that inward work drives outward praxis. In 2022, we are going to be making sure that people are working on both of those tracks simultaneously, doing the inward work, but not stopping there, making sure that this country is safe for Black and brown and other marginalized peoples has to be part of our North Star praxis. Conversely, outward praxis is, while essential, absolutely insufficient. While we are doing the outward work, we need to be able to take deep looks inside, both on a personal level as well as in the aggregate, to root and weed, and to take responsibility for the erosions that have happened within the last 20 years. If you want to go all the way back 40 years to Reagan, we can do that too. Again, Lace on Race is not partisan, but we do hold strong opinions about what the world can and should look like. The choice is ours. Who are we going to be as people who believe in equity and justice? And how are we going to play that out in the 2022 midterm elections?